We begin in Myanmar, where one day after security forces killed dozens, protesters are back on the streets, demanding a return to democracy from the military junta. Coup leaders are facing global condemnation for the crackdown, which happened on Myanmar's armed forces holiday. It was the deadliest day since pro-democracy protests began. More than 400 people have been killed since the army seized power on February 1st. Journalist Dave Grunebaum is following the story from Kuala Lumpur and joins me now. Dave, on top of all the deaths yesterday, there are reports in local media of a nurse being shot in the head today while trying to help wounded people. What impact does this have on the protest movement, if at all?
It just makes them even more determined to push back against this military coup. This nurse who was reportedly killed today while tending to wounded people, well, it's not the first time that the security forces have targeted medical workers since the coup on February 1st. And to the people who are against this military government, which is the overwhelming majority of the population, this just exemplifies why they have to push back against it, because they believe if they don't stand up to this military government now, they'll be dealing with these same issues for at least another generation, because the junta wants the public to live in absolute fear. They are trying to terrorize them. So you're going to see the street demonstrations continue. Now, some demonstrators, they've radicalized some of them, and they're fighting back using, makeshift weapons, Molotov cocktails, makeshift rifles. But then what's really been the most effective part of the movement so far, which is of course also going to continue, is the work stoppage. So many government employees are refusing to work for this military government. It's crippled some of the ministries. The banking sector is barely functioning, and that's all going to continue.
Now, the defense chiefs from 12 countries signed a statement condemning Saturday's bloodshed. Is that enough? In other words, will it change anything?
It's not going to change anything on the ground with how the junta operates, because this military junta has absolutely no moral compass. Keep in mind, this is the same army that just a few years ago killed more than 10,000 Rohingya Muslims in a span of just a few months, according to United Nations investigators. And if the junta decides they're going to have to take a similar tactic and be just as violent against the general population in Myanmar, if they feel they need to go that far, well, they will do it, because this is the way this junta operates. They think along the same lines of juntas past in Myanmar have. It's the same playbook, just a new generation of junta leaders.
We're hearing that talks are underway that could lead to the resistance forming its own army. What would that mean for this current conflict? Would we be talking about a full-fledged civil war?
It certainly could potentially lead to that if they pull together this, supposed national resistance army. It's hypothetical right now, but what they'd be talking about is taking these different armed ethnic groups that are in the ethnic minority states who've been fighting battles. I mean, they're armed, they've got weapons. They've been fighting battles against the Myanmar army for decades to try and give their respective ethnic minority states more autonomy, more say over their own internal affairs. So you would hypothetically bring some of these different groups together. As well, there are already in the jungles been formed these camps where students and office workers from the city, civilians, are going to get crash courses in guerrilla warfare. I'm not really clear on the numbers, but those numbers could certainly grow. So you hypothetically take those people who go through that training along with some of these armed ethnic groups, and you have this sort of national resistance army. What's not clear, if it does happen, is where would most of these battles take place? Would it be in the more rural areas, or would you see it in the major cities? It's really hard to guess the tactics if this all really does come to fruition.
Dave Grunebaum, journalist in Kuala Lumpur, really appreciate your insights.